Don't be afraid. Life is good. I try to live in joyful hope. We hope for things that are not yet, but might be near, rather than be frustrated or angry or disappointed. In the meantime, I try to wait in joyful hope for the next thing. In Christian language, Good Friday turns into Easter morning pretty quickly. It's only 3 days. Um, can you hold on? And in the meanwhile, can whatever it is that's troubling you, while it's troubling you, can you turn around and help somebody else? Do your troubles have to completely incapacitate you so that you're no good to yourself or anybody else? Or while you're waiting for something to turn, could you be useful?
Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay, a podcast discussing meditation, the near death experience, spiritually inspirational and transformative experiences. Is it possible to get stuck between two worlds, this world and the next world? Our guest says yes, and he helps people to find their way back to the light. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, author, and teacher, Jay Spillers. Please do like and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is Father Nathan Castle. How are you, Nathan?
I've never been better. How about you, Jay?
Oh, I'm doing great. So, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what you do?
Well, okay. I'm a Catholic priest. I am 69 years old. I've been doing campus ministry much of my career on college campuses, Arizona State University, Stanford, UC Riverside, and now I live on the campus of the University of Arizona in Tucson. Um, but the work that you're have me on your show today, it has to do with a series of books that I've written that are called Afterlife Interrupted. That's what they look like. There's three of them in the series. The first one, the subtitle of it is Helping Stuck Souls Crossover. We got rid of the word stuck in the second one. And the third one, we just used the subtitle, Please Let Me Explain. But in essence, my prayer partners and I deal with souls who died in a sudden, tragic, violent way, who come in the night about once a week. They give me uh, a dream that doesn't feel like a nightmare, even though it might be showing a violent death. It's buffered somehow. They're just trying to get information across. They're showing me what happened to them. And they have, for the most part, been in an afterlife level where they needed help to kind of regroup from what happened to them, maybe come to some truth. There might be something holding them back that causes them to be stuck. Usually, some over exaggerated idea. I'll get into that a little bit more. Sometimes it's just not telling the truth to themselves or needed to come to a better understanding of their life and what happened to them until they're ready to move on. We think of ourselves as the discharge staff in a medical center. Jay, have you ever had to have surgery or be in a hospital more than a night?
Not recently. I have had eye surgery, but it was within the day, and it was probably about 12 years ago or so.
Well, for anybody in your audience that's had to be in a hospital uh, for a few days, there comes a point when you don't need to be there anymore. You're healthy enough to go home, and there's somebody put in charge of that process. Somebody, a social worker maybe, or someone, make sure you understand your physical therapy, your medications, follow up appointments, your ride home. Make sure that you'll be well housed and fed, those kind of things. It feels like that's what we do for these souls that just needed extra attention in the afterlife because of a trauma that they had been through.
Well, so a stuck soul is basically someone that isn't able to fully ascend into the light or into heaven, if you will.
There certainly is a movement towards more and more light and more truth. In what I just try to stick with what I've seen. We've done about 600 of these over the last 27 or 8 years. I keep saying we because I use prayer partners who live in different parts of the country. When I began doing this work years ago, I always did it in person. But then when the pandemic happened and it was pretty impossible to be with people in a room, we transferred over to remote calls on Zoom, and they work just fine. Um, but in short, I get a dream, I write it down. Uh, Within a few weeks after that, I'll have scheduled an appointment with a prayer partner or two. We'll go into what I call protected prayer. I make sure that I'm a Catholic Christian. I use Saint Michael the Archangel, Mary, the Mother of Jesus, Saint Dominic, the patron of the Dominican order that I'm a member of, a number of other saint friends and angels to stand guard over us and just keep us safe. I believe that every human and every angel is well made, but not everyone is well behaved. Not everyone is good company. So I don't pick up hitchhikers here or hereafter. We make sure that our space is secure. I'll read the story that I wrote down in the dream journal to my partners. I'll usually read it twice in a row just to let it sink in. Uh, and then I'll invite usually the guardian angel of the soul that brought the story to get on the line first because they borrow my voice to do this work. I believe that's a prophetic gift. No, it's commonly called channeling, but in the church, that is a radioactive word that upsets people and suggests the demonic or occult. I don't believe it needs to be that. It's just a thing. And St. Paul in his letters talks about a gift of prophecy, and I believe that's what this is. But I'll let them speak through when I do. They're co-conscious with me. I'm not entranced. I just let somebody borrow my voice like I'm sitting next to them. Um, the guardian usually will give us a little clarity. Um, Jay, dreams can be sort of fuzzy or symbolic. Uh, and so I say, this is what I received and wrote down. Is this correct? Sometimes I feel like that if, for example, a person was in a car crash, but they didn't indicate whether they were male or female, I'd like to know that before we go any further. Sometimes there's a crowd scene, and I'm not absolutely sure if we're helping one person or more than one. So a little clarity at the front end. The angel usually says, I'm going to slide to the side now and be with you in prayer while you speak to the one that I guard and love. Then that person comes on the line, and usually within about 20 minutes, we hear a little synopsis of what their story is like, what they've been through before and after their death. And then we help them form an idea about who they'd like to have as a guide or escort to the next part of their afterlife because they're going somewhere they haven't been yet. So that in a nutshell is what we do.
So is your dreams, I've had visitation dreams, one where my dad came to me after he passed a
Uh-huh.
month later, and it's
Yeah.
basically like a lucid dream where it felt very vivid, very real. It was very realistic. Felt just like when you're awake, and I knew I was in a dream. Is it kind of like a lucid dream where okay, I'm in a dream, someone's visiting me. It's not just, you
Yes.
know,
Now
hazy.
we don't know what we don't know. There might be times when people tried to get my attention and sleeping where I just was too groggy or missed, just didn't get the message. But they do happen about once a week. And as you said, they do feel more vivid. And the subject matter is so different than the rest of my normal dreaming. Um, you know, I don't know do you remember your dreams on a regular basis? Can you most of the time say something you dreamt about in the morning?
Well, it seems like the past few years it's been more. I don't really remember them too well, but sometimes I do. And like when you have a lucid dream, you definitely remember it because it feels like being awake, like your waking hours, and you're
Yes.
very much aware of what's going on. You
Some of
know.
them are very, very lucid and clear. Lucid is from light, so that some of them feel very bright. Um, People frequently ask me, how did you know this wasn't just that when it first happened, how did you know that it wasn't just something you ate or something your psyche was uh, representing? It was so different, and the subject matter. The first one was a man on fire on the engine of a car. Uh, It wasn't my car. I didn't know the guy. It had nothing to do with me. And so many, I learned that I am usually dealing with people who died in violent trauma, or they had a trauma that uh, kind of crushed their soul earlier in life and they never really got over it until they died. And then in the afterlife, they're healing from whatever that was. But trauma is the baseline, is the commonality. And yeah, these dreams just feel different from any other kind of my normal dreaming. Because they happen
Well, like,
so
have you
often.
ever gotten verification?
You mean had death certificates, contact with relatives, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. That's not to say I won't, but up to now, I've asked that question. I believe I'm following the lead of the Holy Spirit, and I don't think of this as so much my work as it is the Spirit's work that I participate in. And when I've asked that question, I've consistently got no, not yet. And there might be a day when I have a partner who's ready to do verification in the next couple of years, but he's getting some training in specifics of it. That so that could be in the works in my not too distant future.
Mhm. Well, so this has been happening for like 30 years, hasn't it? That
Yes.
you've been having these dreams and then you pray and help rescue them out.
Yeah, I don't think other people that do similar work use the word rescue, and I don't really because it seems a little over dramatic for what I'm doing. That metaphor that I gave is sitting near the hospital door and helping somebody in the wheelchair or something like that. I don't feel like I'm rescuing anybody. I'm I'm part of like in a bucket brigade. I'm in a chain of people doing their job and helping somebody move from very needy, the way that hospitals are organized. You know, somebody's in the emergency room, and then there's somebody in surgery, and there's somebody that just does that brings food, or uh, you know, hospitals have all kind of specialization. But I just feel like we do our job, but I'm not rescuing anybody. But I'm part of a process that helps them move along and ascend. You could use the word ascend if you want. Um, Certainly move on.
So, I mean, has it increased over the years? Because, like, as you start to write your books and you do podcasts and your name gets out there, and maybe a loved one is watching it and the spirit sees it, sees a podcast of that their loved one is watching, that they think, well, maybe I'll go to you. Has it increased, the number of people that come to see you over the years?
Not really. I've only had that happen once, where I did meet some relatives, but that's only happened once. And as I've just mentioned, I'd be open to that possibility if and when the time is right. But for right now, I just stay at my post and do what I do. They keep coming at the rate of once a week, so I just keep helping the next one. When we do the sessions, I have an iPhone and I have an app on it that records the session. And when we're finished, I just hit a button and AI transcribes it into a Word document. I get the whole thing in writing about within 5 minutes. And then I clean up the document just a little bit to get rid of annoying stammers and incomplete sentences or run-on sentences. I try to keep the feel of what that person sounded like, but without about it being annoying. And then when we want to use somebody's story in a book or on a podcast to tell it publicly, we don't do that without having gone back to them at least once to ask their permission. So we'll go into protected prayer and say, "Hey Jay, you remember us? We helped you out a few years ago. We're thinking about using your story out loud in a book or on a podcast. What do you think?" And so when we do that, it would be a yes or no question that could be answered in a word. But most of the time, it's just people behaving like people. And so before we jump right into the work, we might talk a little bit about how's it been going? What's new with you, Jay? And so we'll hear a little bit of follow up of what people did after we last saw them and something of what they're doing now. And then they'll answer our question. Is it okay to use your story?
So would you say most of these spirits are what people would call ghosts?
Well, they're no longer in the body that they had on the earth that died. Um, and Geist is that's just the German word for spirit. Catholics old as me or a little older would remember praying to the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Um, the So yeah, they're etymologically they would be uh, ghosts. I just think of them as being people whose energy moved from a physical body to a next way of being, however that works. It's fun though because there's
Mm.
some. I've seen some of them kind of have fun with showing that they've learned how to manifest themselves in different ways. For example, in your home, do you have any old photographs of loved ones, grandparents, or parents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there a picture on the wall of somebody on their wedding day or in their military uniform? Maybe taken 50 years ago.
Yeah, they're actually.
Most of
Mm-hmm.
us
Yeah.
stuff like that. So when they want to identify themselves, sometimes they'll show up like that, and they might even look like those kind of sepia brown tones of old photographs or black and white, and they'll show you that, and then they'll morph into what they look like now. They'll make sure you understand it's
Mm-hmm.
me, your grandpa, and then and then they'll often show up looking like they were at whatever their peak was,
Mm-hmm.
wherever they're in, maybe their late 30s or maybe what they look like now. They can do that. So they're embodied in different ways, but their bodies are more flexible than ours are.
So, like, what are some interesting stories that you can share with us? People you've helped over the years.
I'm fascinated with one I'm just doing. We've written 3 books, and the last one came out in 2023. But I started a podcast 3 years ago, and I had in mind that I'd like to start releasing new stories via the podcast rather than another book. So I've done some of that, and the current one is a guy who showed me a couple of years ago. I was in a World War II battlefield context, and I saw American soldiers, fighting each other, and it turned out that the fight started over a stick of chewing gum, but it moved
Hmm.
into fist fights, and gunfire, and people died. And it turned out that the guy that showed it to me was named Mason. That's his last name. He showed it to me the way, on military uniforms, very often right over the heart, there's their name, just their last name, or maybe on the back of the helmet. He showed it to me like that. And he explained that when Pearl Harbor happened, he was a young American, healthy man. And he said, at that time and place, it would have been impossible for me not to enlist. Every young American guy was enlisting. And because he was already a journalist, they sent him to war correspondence school. So instead of being at the front lines firing a weapon, he said they made me learn how to shoot one, but I was sort of analogous to the chaplain. I had a special role that didn't involve shooting at an enemy. My job was to be in the background with my typewriter, uh, writing the history of the unit, and he also had to do the unit's formal correspondence. One of those jobs was to write letters home after when a soldier was killed, to next of kin. So that was his job. So he became a journalist because he loved telling stories and he liked people to know the truth of things. But when he got into this military system, he learned that he was not allowed to write that story because it reflected badly on the unit and it didn't promote the war effort. And so he he said people during the war understood that censorship was commonplace, and that when you got letters from someone in Europe or in the Pacific, oftentimes there'd be strike throughs of anything that suggested location or the name of a ship or something like that. He said people understood that there was military censorship that was for the common good, but he said it bothered me the rest of my life. I didn't die during the war. I lived for decades longer and died an old man, but I felt like I had um, dishonored some of my brethren because I didn't tell their story truthfully. He also had to write letters of condolence home and say, your son or daughter, I mean, your son or your husband uh, died in the service of his country. Some kind of bland phrase like that rather than telling the truth. The full, how in a courtroom we say, will you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? He felt like he didn't do his
Mm-hmm.
job. And it bothered him his whole life. He said most people didn't want to hear war stories unless they were inspiring. And a lot of guys went to the American Legion Hall or the Veterans of Foreign War Hall and drank because nobody really wanted to hear war stories except really sanitized ones, and because they're so awful. And he said, I understood that. And he said it took the edge off the 4th of July and Memorial Day for me because all that patriotism, I just felt like I knew another part of the story that I couldn't speak. And it really bothered him, even into his afterlife. So we he learned in the afterlife, some people kind of got to him and helped him see that, or maybe challenge him and say, what do you wish you had done? Or what were some other options that you might have had that you didn't choose? Um, in the end, they helped him see I was really between a rock and a hard place. I didn't have enough um, seniority or rank to do anything except do what I was told. I did what I was told, not because I wanted to, but because I was following orders. Um, he had to kind of forgive himself, and he felt he needed to apologize and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't tell the whole truth," and that helped him get unstuck, if you will. He did a kind of afterlife apology,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of eased up a bit on himself. I'm a Catholic priest, and I hear people's confessions. And part of our training is to be careful because sometimes people will come in and accuse themselves much more harshly than anyone else would do or that God would. People can be quite hard on themselves. I don't know if you've experienced that, but sometimes people will form an
Mm-hmm.
idea that is really unfair to themselves and harmful, and that nobody else around them wants to agree with it. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. People do that, and they die that way. And sometimes they have to come to the truth so that they can be at peace and uh, and and live a better version of themselves. Uh, Catholics would call that purgatory, some sort of afterlife process where you heal or rest or regroup. But anyway, that story is one that's on my mind because it's current on my podcast. And we went back and got his permission. And right at the end of it, the prayer partner I was letting him talk through me, and my prayer partner said, "So, Sergeant Mason, do you have any advice that you would give to people who hear your story?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Do your best and then do a little bit more. However, you might do that, Jay. Jay, do your best and do a little bit more." So he wanted to push the envelope, but he said, "But you got to keep it." uh, you can't ask yourself to do the impossible. Do your best and a little bit more. That's what he had to say.
So, I mean, for the living, is it something to where we won't get stuck? Is to learn to forgive ourselves while we're alive, and learn to embrace the idea that we will die, and maybe take the attitude like, sort of prepare yourself mentally for your passing, and you've heard the idea of like live each day like it's your last day because it might be. Is that
Yes,
something that could sort of help people in this side to help people not get stuck?
absolutely. And much of my work is with people on this side. I'm not in the ozone layer all the time. I'm helping flesh and
Mhm.
blood people all around me on a regular basis. Uh, One of the critical things in the Christian tradition, Jesus is quoted as having said, um, Judge not, lest you be judged. Leave that to others. And then from the cross, with one of his dying breaths, he said, Father, forgive them all. They don't know what they're doing. He didn't wait for an apology, an explanation, anything. He just forgave unilaterally because he had the freedom to do so. And Jay, so do you, and so do your listeners. We all have the power to at least get started, like Sergeant Mason said, do your best and a little bit more. If you can't finish the job today, does that mean you can't start it? Can you start forgiving somebody who has hurt you, even if you can't finish the job? Start today and then do a little more tomorrow. And don't wait for an apology or even necessarily a change of behavior. You might need to get out of harm's way if there's somebody that's abusive. I'm not saying to stay with an abuser, but sometimes we've been hurt by people who never acknowledge that they hurt us, and sometimes they do it maliciously and willfully. Other times it's not. Sometimes people just do stupid things that harm other people, but they didn't really mean it. But forgiving is a huge one. And if there's anybody that you and that can oftentimes come with the help of a counselor, a confidant, a clergy person, somebody that can help you talk through things and see things from a different point of view. Because sometimes we can get stuck with our own version of a story, and the way we tell that story is becomes ironclad. We just believe that it's that old phrase, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Very often people say that when they don't want to change their mind. And sometimes when they would be better off if they did. If they told a different version of that story that was a little more true, they might be happier. So
Hmm.
uh, doing the best you can and a little bit more to uh, and have the humility to ask other people their opinion about things that you've decided upon. Jay, this is the way I think about that event. What do you think? And if you have the ability to invite somebody to give you advice or course correction or at least a different point of view, that can be really helpful.
Well, do you ever have people come to you that maybe didn't die in a traumatic way, but maybe just felt like they weren't ready to go? Because it seems like my mom had cancer and she really didn't like the idea of death. Because I've seen a lot of people that were on the verge of death and they had that acceptance of it. And she
Uh-huh.
never really got to that point.
Hmm.
Do souls like that ever get stuck and do they come to you?
Once in a while, I don't get very many that died natural deaths, but I remember Dr. Lawrence was a college professor who was brilliant and very organized, and um, he began to, I think, I'm trying to remember, I think he had a fall, maybe broke a hip, and then had a whole cascade of different medical maladies that followed that. And he ended up having to be in rehab that never worked, you know, uh, making him do exercises to get his strength back, and they never worked. And he got more and more discouraged and got more and more dependent upon nursing care until he was bedridden. He said, my days became moving from the bed to the potty chair. And he just hated his existence. And he said, I felt like a caged bird. And he said, I died during the night while I was unconscious and I woke up in a different place. And this is what he said, Jay, I took the cage with me. He didn't
Mm.
wake up in a happy afterlife. He woke up caged, like he had left. He got so used to it. That happens sometimes, that people can have a kind of inertia at the end of their life and get so used to not being able to do things that it takes a while for them to understand in the afterlife that that's not their circumstance anymore. They don't have the same limits that they did earlier, but you have to get up and get moving. There's like an afterlife rehab. If you didn't do it here, you do it afterwards, where you get up and get moving. And very often they'll send people from childhood. Like if your mom needed anything like that after she passed, they might bring her really people from really happy memories in her childhood, where there's not illness and age, where there's just happy memories and uh, they'll do things to kind of coax a person and say, after we visit you, we're going to go out for lunch. Next time we come, maybe you'll go with us. Something like that. They'll kind of try to get them up and moving if they're sluggish in the first part of their afterlife.
You're listening to the Inspire Me with Jay podcast. Please do like and subscribe to the channel, bringing hope and inspiration to the world.
Well, is most of the people that come to you people that have passed away relatively recently, or do you ever get people that died decades or even centuries ago that come see you?
I'm 69 years old, and most of the people I've dealt with died either during my lifetime or within the 20th century. Once in a while, I'll get people. I've had a couple of different Civil War ones. Um, I've had some that went back to a shipwreck that was about the time of some of Columbus's voyages, um, but not very many. They're mostly a lot more contemporary than that. And sometimes they'll let you know. They'll do it. You know the way movies will orient you to time and place in the first 2 minutes. You sit down in the theater and the movie
Mm-hmm.
starts, and either with automobiles, fashion, music in the background, um, signage, whether it's in English or another language, they'll kind of orient you towards space. And then sometimes there'll be a crowd and they zoom in on somebody in the crowd so that the audience now knows who they're to care about. It's sometimes like that at the front end. Um, and one of the ways they'll do that is with a cell phone. When did you first have a cell phone? What year do you think you first got a cell phone?
I think it was about 2001.
So if a lot of these involved sudden accidental things like car crashes, where if anybody was able to, they would get on their cell phone and call 911. So those tell us that when that happens, that these have been in the last 25 years, roughly 30 tops, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then cars, and then sometimes there's just a feeling uh, of like I felt like with Sergeant Mason that I was in World War II. I don't know how to say it any other way except it felt like World War II. Uh, and it did turn out to be that. Once in a while, I'll be in a foreign country. We've done several that were in Iraq or Syria, Libya, places where there's been violence during our lifetime, political unrest. Sometimes South America, but mostly the United States.
There was probably a lot of people on 9/11 that got stuck, maybe,
Yes,
because it was a
I've
very
dealt with,
traumatic thing.
yeah, I've dealt with a few of those. Um, and everybody has their own story that, more than 3,000 people died in that event, but everybody has a first person narrative of where they were, why they were there, what happened to them during it. And uh, one thing that happens sometimes is sometimes when people die a violent death, the last thing they can remember was the screeching of the tires, and then everything went black. And then they woke up somewhere else. Other times they'll have a story about moving through the whole experience. I've dealt with one guy who was a young scientist, and he was autistic, and he was interested in his autism and what was its cause and what were its characteristics, and it has to do with consciousness. And so he was involved in consciousness studies, um, and as he realized he was dying, he insisted that he stay alert to every minute of it, every moment of it, so he could observe it the way a scientist would. He wanted to understand the whole of it. He didn't want to sleep through any of it. And so he was able to do that. So, on
Mm-hmm.
9/11, people died in different ways. One of them, um, um, this story I don't have full permission to use, but it was one of the people who leapt from one of the really high floors. You remember seeing some of those awful pictures? He said, I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't jump to my death. I had the option of breathing air that was on fire or air that wasn't on fire. And the air that wasn't on fire was out the window. That's the way he described it. He said, I went out the window in order to breathe air that wasn't on fire. And then in his consciousness, he said, I could allow myself to fall, but I couldn't allow into my consciousness hitting the ground. And so that was the case of what you would call a stuck soul, because he was in a loop. He was just falling, but not landing. And he did that for some time. And his guardian was with him and said, you know what? All we ever do is fall. Could we just take a break? And instead of going down, could we go up for just a minute? He said, would you get on my back and let me fly you up for just a minute? And he did that. And then once he saw that he could break the cycle, he said, if you need to go back into it, go ahead. But I want you to know that it's possible for you to break out of this cycle. It's up to you. And eventually he was able to do that. And that's just the way his own psyche dealt with the trauma of what he was going through. There's no rule that says you had to do it that way. That's just what he did. But his story ended up with a happy ending in that he did survive his death, as everyone does, and he went on to other things. He just needed to get past that memory.
Have you ever wondered whether the Bible was compatible with a near-death experience? In my book, Heaven's Truth, the parallels between the Bible and the near-death experience, your faith will be strengthened while you support this channel. In Heaven's Truth, you will learn about near-death experiences and other similar experiences in the Bible. Support for the Bible contained in NDEs. A central theme that runs through both the Bible and NDEs. How the NDE brings the Bible to life for these modern times. Evidence for both the Bible and the NDE, and much more. Great book. Spillers does an excellent job weaving the relationship between NDEs and the scriptures. 5 stars on Amazon. Available on Amazon. Well, like things like when you look at the near-death experience, most of the people, a lot of times they die from accidents and traumatic things, but 90+% of them go instantly into the light and have heavenly experiences, which seems different than like the people that get stuck that you're dealing with. Why don't you see more near-death experiences where people say, I feel like I was stuck, but they just embarrassed to come forward, some of them?
Well, a lot of people who have near-death experiences have heart attacks or some other malfunction of the body system. The ones that we deal with mostly, a lot of them are gunshot victims, car crashes, lots of car crashes, lots of accidental deaths in all kind of different ways, fires, floods, drowning, suicides. And again, they have trauma associated with it. I mean, I suppose having a heart attack and dying is its own kind of trauma, but it might be different than being shot. Or, you might be angry at your heart for stopping, but somebody blowing a hole through your heart's another matter. So we have this population that died in violent ways. That's not to say that everybody that dies in a violent, sudden, traumatic way needs what we do, because I doubt that they do. I'm sure a lot of them are able to just kind of regroup, land, reassess, rest, move along. But for whatever reason, there is a place, at least, for people that need the care that is provided there and that we're at the tail end of. No, there's no one size fits all. Everybody dies their own way and deals with it their own way. And some of the ones that we deal with were relatively lighthearted and quick to adapt and didn't need very much of this at all. Because people like that die. There are people who are funny and who stay in the present moment and deal with whatever. There are other people that don't do that very well, who get very set in their ways or determined that things must be this way. And then when everything changes all at once, they're very disoriented. And and sometimes angry that somebody that they're now not with their loved ones. And some of them, they need to go ahead and be angry for a while and get that out of their system. But they're often reminded, remember, Jay, you can be as angry as long as you please, but it's not going to move you. You can stay here and be angry if you want to. And it's understandable, but we really hope that soon you'll make another decision. You know, they get a lot of coaching like that. I had one guy that died in the
Mhm.
1930s playing minor league baseball. His name was Iron Mike. That was his baseball name. He hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth at a home game that won the game. And he was rounding third base when suddenly there was a commotion in the stands where he had hit the ball. And as he was crossing home plate, it was becoming apparent that there was an emergency in the stands. And it turned out that the ball hit a baby and killed it. This guy was like 23 or 4, and he the public address announcer explained what was happening and asked everybody to stand and pray. The dugouts emptied out onto the field, and everyone was praying for this baby. And at his feet was the bat that he used to hit the ball. And on the spot, he just convicted himself of killing a baby, and that was it. He wouldn't hear anything anybody tried to say to him. I killed a baby. And he said, I walked away from baseball. And as I did, I walked away from every friend I ever had. I didn't have any friends that weren't in baseball. He said, I wanted to crawl in a hole and die. And I lived in Western Pennsylvania, and there's coal mines all over the place. So I thought, that's perfect. I'll become a coal miner. I'll crawl in a hole every day and get black lung and die when I'm 50. And that was his plan. He said, I got a room in a boarding house. I got up and went to work. I climbed into a hole in the ground. When I came home at night, I climbed into the bottle. He drank himself into sleep and did that over and over and over again until he died. And then in the afterlife, he had to deal with the fact that he had created this world consequent to that horrible event, but there were other options that he didn't allow himself. And he kept telling people in Earth and later in the afterlife that, no, get away from me. I'm a baby killer. And he was so isolated. And then they started bringing him children because somehow children got to him. And eventually they brought him children who died playing baseball because a kid can run into the street and get hit by a car, chasing a ball. And this little guy said to him, Mister, when I got killed playing baseball, I was really, really mad for a long time. And then I changed my mind. And this guy said, what? You just changed your mind? How do you do that? I don't know. I just changed my mind. And he thought, oh, okay, duh, I could do that. And he worked on it, and his team helped him. And he eventually he came out onto the field at Yankee Stadium the way that Lou Gehrig did in that old newsreel. Have you ever seen that scene of Lou Gehrig calling himself the luckiest man alive because he's got Lou Gehrig's disease? You ever seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Lou Gehrig was
Yeah, I
on the
think I
pitch.
have.
Yeah, it's very classic. It's 1947 newsreel, and Lou Gehrig was there on the mound, and there was a bunch of people in the stands of this baseball stadium. And he said all the people were people who had tried to talk sense to me that I wouldn't listen to. That every last person who ever tried to console me and get me to ease up on myself was in the stands. And I had to walk onto the field and speak into a microphone. And he said, I almost chickened out, except he said there were these little kids that were, he said the boys were in baseball uniforms and the girls were those little summer girls, whatever that meant to him, but some kind of baseball related children's thing. And he said they all won a contest to get to walk Iron Mike onto the field from the dugout. And if I don't go out there, I'm going to disappoint all these kids. So when he was about to chicken out, he had to go onto the field because the kids, it was their turn to walk him to the microphone. And then Lou Gehrig yielded the microphone and he said, "I'm sorry that I was such a hard-headed case and that you were just trying to talk sense to me. All of you, I apologize, and I know that what you were trying to tell me was true. I didn't kill a baby. All I did was swing a bat and hit a ball." That's all he needed to do. And then a crowning part for me is my mom, who's a big baseball fan, walked him back to the dugout. We're big Houston Astros fans, and my mom was there. She passed in 2012, and she walked him back to the dugout. I wonder what your mom's doing. Maybe there's a happy story. It didn't end so happily. It sounded like she was scared of dying, but maybe by now she's gotten over that and has gone on to do something happy. I hope you'll hear her, or maybe she'll be able to show you sometime some happy, thing she's up to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. But do you ever get people come back to you after you've prayed for them and helped them and told you I'm great now and I'm doing good on the other side?
The funny thing that happens, Jay, is they come back as helpers. They don't just come back to say thank you or hello or anything. They show up to help somebody else. There was a guy in Iraq whose name was Nadi, Nadi. He was a businessman in Baghdad. His mosque got blown up by the other kind of Muslim, the Sunni Shia fighting. And he said, my prayers offended them. But he said the city was in such chaos that our congregation didn't have a proper imam, a pastor anymore. So he said it was up to some of us who were leaders to find us another place to worship that was safe. And he said we found a place that was a warehouse that had almost no glass because we didn't want to be in a place with glass. We wanted something that was more bunker like. But Muslim men and women don't pray in the same room, so they needed two spaces. And the men were in their space, and the women were across an alley in another space when there was gunfire. And he said, we men had to decide, do we go try to protect our women, or do we stay in here where it's safe? Well, he opened the door to the alley, and he saw people bleeding all over the place. He wasn't sure what direction the bullets were coming from. He turned to his right, and there was a 10-year-old girl with a machine gun and men standing over her with machine guns to her head, demanding that she shoot and kill him. And she did. So he died in a trauma. But in his story, his dad came for him on a float. There's those two big rivers in Iraq, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and the region is
Hmm.
only really habitable because of those rivers. Otherwise, it's desert. And he said almost every celebration we ever had something to do with the rivers. They were festivals of one kind or another that were about harvest festivals and things. And usually they were done at the riverside. And very often we had floats, like a parade that might be down Main Street, except it was on a flat boat that was decorated. And that was part of his childhood memory. And his dad came for him on one. Um, so later on, he showed up to help a young guy who was only 10 years old in Iraq or Afghanistan, I think. And his school was attacked by a militia, and all the boys were rounded up and kidnapped into this militia. And he never saw his parents again. He was forced to be a soldier at 10 years old. And he said there were bullets flying all the time, and eventually one of them had my name on it. He said I got killed by a bullet. And when he came to us, the person who came to help him at the end was Nadi, the businessman who we had helped previously. And Nadi was real sweet. He said, I was so surprised when you helped me and you turned out to be an American, a Christian, and a priest. He said, I would never have thought I'd have anything to do with any of those categories. But an American, a Christian, and a priest showed up to help me. And he said, now they've showed me that my religion taught me many true things, but that it didn't have everything just right. And he said, too often we were taught to think very highly of our own kind and not so much of other people. He said, for example, when a plane crashes, they will say 350 people died and among them were 3 Muslims. You know, well, Americans will do that. You know, an Air India plane goes down, and we'll hear all these people died, and among them there was 2 Americans. He said, "It's we. I've had to unlearn here this idea that some people are more important than other people, and that we're all children of the one God, and so on." So anyway, yes, that's a long answer to your question, but sometimes people do come back, but when they do, it's usually to help. And he said, but he told my sister is one of my prayer partners, and he said to her, after doing this crossing is what we call them, I became something of a student of the work that you and your brother do. And he said, I've been studying it, and they put me to work being a part of it. So that happened.
Hmm. Well, do you think that everybody eventually makes it to the light, makes it to back to God?
Not against their will, for sure. They'd have to, at some point, want it. Um, that's my hope. Before he died, in the last 6 months of his life, Pope Francis was asked if he believed in hell. And his answer was, if there is one, I hope there's no one in it. That's all he said. And within the Catholic Christian tradition, there are 2 traditions that seem to be self-contradictory. There's one that's strong on a hell that Jesus assigns people to. There's also Jesus forgiving everybody on the cross without condition. There's also the story of the um, prodigal son, who's gone away and wasted the fortune and comes back, and all the father wants is to hug him. I think both of those things are in play, and uh, I I pray frequently for notorious people. I pray most nights for people that you would think would be beyond saving, because I believe that's my job. Jesus is my savior, and it's not up to me to decide somebody's not worth the trouble. Uh, so I'm going to live that way, and then I'll find out the answer to your question. Maybe I'll come back to you in a dream and tell you if I die before you do.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was going to say that there's been one near-death experience that I remember, where she was told by God and Jesus that hell itself is more like a purgatory, that it's not endless. I don't know if is that something that
I hope that's
the
true.
Catholic Church would be open to?
Well, some people would and others wouldn't. The Catholic Church is 1.4 billion people, and they don't agree on everything. Um, we have creeds and catechisms, and but I've been a Catholic all my life, and we don't agree on everything. Um, and sometimes we're very unpleasant in our disagreeing. Nevertheless, I hold out hope that everyone has value and that I'm not giving up. And if I learn later that there are some who are beyond hope, I'll take in that information as it comes. But there's a lot of prayers that we pray. Uh, there's a prayer that was given at Fatima when Mary appeared in Fatima, Portugal, in early 19 teens. Uh, Oh, my Jesus, forgive us our sins and save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. So I just believe there's plenty of room for me to live inside this tradition, and hope that everyone eventually decides that they will let the light in. C.S. Lewis, did you ever read any C.S. Lewis? The Screw Tape Letters, maybe, or um, The Great
Yeah,
Divorce?
I mean, I've heard. Yeah, I've listened to them. Yeah, the Screw Tape
He
Letters. Yeah.
He believes that he wrote that he believes that hell is locked from the inside, that people create their hell, and they can stay in it as long as they want to keep it locked. And that's part of what I've seen people do in the work that we do, is they're unlocking something. They're willing to let, like Iron Mike, the little kid that said, I changed my mind. And he said, oh, okay, I'll change my mind too, I guess. Um, I hope that people can let in truth, Um, there's a lot of people who who felt the need to hide something for a long time. People that had some scandal or were involved in some illegality that was undiscovered, who lived with the secret for a long time and denied the truth. Um, there's a day of reckoning for that, and it can start on the day of your death. You'll be well treated and loved, but you do need to come to the truth of things and kind of own up to them and apologize where it's appropriate and live in the light. And I think that happens in a case by case basis, but it's part of the work that my partners and I have been given to do, and at least among this little population that was traumatized.
Mm. So, I mean, it's probably a good idea, and it's, for Protestants, it would probably seem kind of strange, like, but it's a good idea to pray for people that have died, because you may help them to ascend up to a higher realm, or, something like that.
Yeah, if people are open to the idea, if they're not, okay. But I grew up in a town in Southeast Texas that was half Catholic and half Baptist, and when I learned at 7 years old or 6 that the Catholics are the only ones who pray for their deceased loved ones, I started getting the obituary pages out of the newspapers and taking them to bed with me, and I'd pray for the Protestants. I figured their families are not going to do it because they've been told not to, but I'll do it. So once in the early 60s, nobody had a funeral at the beach or at the lake, the cabin or whatever. Everybody had a funeral in a church, even if they never went to that church. And so at the bottom of an obituary, it used to always name a church. And if it wasn't a Catholic church, I would pray for that person before I was going to sleep. I would just introduce myself. And I had this idea that purgatory must be organized because on the first pages of the Bible, God's creating order out of chaos. It wouldn't be a mob. It would be an orderly line, and there'd be some sort of gradation or something. So my dad used to take me to the bank because he created a college saving fund for each of us 5 kids the week we were born. And he would take us to the bank and have us hand the little book to the lady, and the number always got bigger because that was for college. He didn't take that money out. But when you got to the bank, you couldn't just go up to the front because there were other people there and you had to wait your turn. And those zigzaggedy velvet rope things that are sometimes in lobbies, or like at amusement
Mm.
parks, or even at the airport where you have to go back and forth and back and forth to get up to the front. I just thought purgatory must be like that. That's what my 7-year-old mind did. So I figured, well, I'll be purgatory's um, worker. And I would come up to you if you just got there, Jay, and say, hey, my name is Nathan. Would you like cuts? Would you like to go up to the front? And so I would pray people up to the front. Um, uh, and then my aunt was a Dominican nun, a first grade teacher, and she said, if yours was the prayer that sprung people from purgatory into heaven, you'll have a friend for all eternity. They'll be eternally grateful to you. So I thought, well, that's low hanging fruit. I'll do that. I'll pray for whoever needs only one more prayer. And I would pray for all the low hanging fruit. And then I would figure the line must have just moved up by one. So I'll go to the back and see who just got there. And then I would say to God, you can put this one anywhere you want. You pick where this one goes. But anyway, I had a very busy little prayer life as a little kid, praying people into heaven. Maybe that's why I ended up doing this as an adult. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like your understanding of purgatory is a lot broader, because I think a lot of people think of purgatory as sort of like just a lesser hell, hell light.
It's
Whereas you're
unfortunate.
saying, no, it's like anybody who hasn't fully ascended.
Well, the catechism, I was just looking at some of it earlier today in advance of this interview. It mentions people, it uses the language of detachment from unholy attachment. So that sounds like Velcro to me. Detaching yourself from something that's attached to you that you shouldn't be attached to, or like barnacles. I don't know. Isn't that why you brush your teeth? Because you've got all that goo that attaches itself to your teeth, something that ought not be there. that's attached to you that it could, that purge means to cleanse. So it has that idea in it, to get rid of something that's unclean and unhelpful. It's metaphoric, but anyway, that's part of it. Um, some of it is a little bit too much crime and punishment for me. Some of it is the purgatory teachings go into serving your sentence because of all your sins. And that could be, I don't know. But Jesus also said from the cross, Father, forgive them all. They don't know what they're doing. Maybe that worked, and you don't need any more work on forgiving sins. But sin just means to miss the mark. It's an archery metaphor in both Hebrew and Greek, and it just means to aim and miss. Um, and I've seen plenty of people who just did things that brought with them into the afterlife unhelpful patterns that they had to detach from, like self-hatred. Um, because you're beloved of God, you you hating yourself doesn't do anybody any good. It's not true. And as long as you continue to hate yourself, you'll hold yourself back, not because you're being punished, but because you've made a choice that you have to deal with the consequences of. I don't know. This mysterious stuff, but I just stay at my post and do my job, and I continue to help the ones that come each week, and I pray for the ones who have died, and I have different practices for people uh, that people think are beyond saving. I, I introduce myself to them in prayer and say, "I'm praying for you. Um, do with that what you want." And my mom also taught me as a little kid that if ever you prayed a prayer wrongly, it wouldn't go to waste. God would recycle it somehow. If you prayed a prayer like for someone's healing that God didn't intend but God intended this to be their final illness, that your prayer would still have some good effect. So that made sense to me.
Well, yeah, like I've seen read near-death experiences where they talk about prayer sort of going up to the throne of God like an energy, and there's something
Yeah.
in Revelation that talks about the prayers of the saints going up to God.
Yes. And I have seen something that does suggest upward movement. Um, but we do a crossing, and they do move from a level to another level. It reminds me of the radio band, you know, uh, how, especially if you're in a car, you might have to readjust the energy to keep the signal strong. You have to turn the knob a little bit as you're getting further away. That there does seem to be some kind of movement that is upward, and you really won't belong there until your energy is at peace. Um, you won't want to be at the next level because it will hurt, like um, car alarms, some unpleasant feeling or sound. You don't want to be near that. You wish it would stop. People don't, they won't go, they go to the appropriate level where their energy matches the energy of that realm. That might sound too woo-woo for some of your audience. I don't understand all these things, but I have been exposed to some of it, and I just listen and take note.
So, what is like one final word you'd like to leave with the audience before we close out?
Don't be afraid. You know, uh, life is good, and I try to live in joyful hope. Um, we hope for things that are not yet, but might be near. Um, and uh, rather than be frustrated or angry or disappointed in the meantime, I try to wait in joyful hope for the next thing. In Christian language, Good Friday turns into Easter morning pretty quickly. It's only 3 days. Um, can you hold on? And in the meanwhile, can whatever it is that's troubling you, uh, while it's troubling you, can you turn around and help somebody else? do your troubles have to completely incapacitate you so that you're no good to yourself or anybody else? Or while you're waiting for something to turn, could you be useful? Could you help someone else?
And
Certainly,
so, where can people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you?
well, thanks for
Huh?
asking. The easiest way is my website is called nathan-castle.com. Nathan, Nathan, -Castle, nathan-castle.com. If you want to contact me, I ask that people read at least one of my 3 books before asking to speak with me, because sometimes they'll see an interview like this one, hear of me for the first time, and dash off an email. In fact, earlier this week, I got you to do a little homework, didn't I? To listen to some of my books on Audible, or read up a little bit before the interview. That way we'll have more to talk about. So if people, I don't do messages, so don't ask me to get in touch with your mother. That's not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I can coach you into how to be more effective at meditation to make yourself more easily reached if your mother wants to talk to you. There are things that I can do, but I don't do messages. And then I have a podcast called The Joyful Friar, FRIAR, that's available wherever you get your podcasts. And I also do speaking engagements, retreats. Um, I've got things going on in Tucson, Arizona, Shreveport, Louisiana right now. Something up in Phoenix probably coming up. So I'm willing to travel to be a speaker other places. I do a lot of those on Zoom. I'm a member of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, and I've been a guest at many of their local chapters. So, but the website is best. Just send me an email. When you do
Okay,
that,
well, thanks for coming on today.
and you go onto the website, a drop-down menu comes up, and one of the things that asks for is your phone number. That's very helpful to me because I like to know where people are so that I'm not trying to contact them at an inappropriate hour. And I like to know what time zone you're in. And then podcasts go overseas. And so sometimes you're in the UK or Australia or somewhere, and it's important to know what time could I text or call.
No, well, thanks for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
I enjoyed being with you, Jay. God bless you.